As the title says, I'm a night guard. I live in Chicago, where the Museum of Science and Industry is located. I grew up in the inner city and went to grade school and high school here. Most of our field trips were to go to the museum. It's fun and apparently educational. So when I graduated college and had nowhere to go, I turned to the Chicago Tribune. I went to the local CVS pharmacy and bought one right off the rack, not something I'd ever thought I'd be doing. I brought it to my apartment and flipped to the classified section. I scanned for any job that there was. Sewage worker? Nah. Window washer? Hell no. Night guard? That was something I could do. Later that day, I called up the number. A female voice politely answered the phone. Hello, this is the Museum of Science and Industry. How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling about your ad in the paper, I replied. Oh yes, you are the first one to call. Let me transfer the line to the security office. I heard a soft click followed by a gruff man's voice. MSI Security Office. Hello, I'm looking for a job, I replied once again. Sure. What's your name, son? Eric Langer, sir. He then proceeded to set up an interview. I met him about 3 days later in the museum offices. As it would turn out, I was the only one who had applied. This made me a shoo-in for the position. About a week later, I started work. The head of security ended up being a man named Jack Steinman. A tough-looking fellow, but nice nonetheless. There were 4 other employees that worked the night shift. I was assigned one of them as my partner. His name was Mike. Mike was instructed to walk me around the museum and tell me what to look for. Every once in a while, we'd have to log some damage done to an exhibit. Nothing too hard. Once I had done at least 4 patrols, each about an hour long, I could sit in the office lounge and browse Reddit. This is where the story becomes weird. If you don't know how the layout is, let me break it down for you. There is a basement, a mid-level and a top level, as well as other offshoots that lead to the space and aviation halls and greenhouse. On the top floor, there is a balcony that looks over the mid-level. Back to the story. 2 nights ago, I was patrolling the upper level, the human anatomy exhibit to be specific. Normally this wouldn't bother me, but being around 1 in the morning, it was getting a little freaky. For those who don't know, they have people who donated their bodies to science there. They professionally prepare the bodies, then flay them and put them on display to educate others. If you want to know more, just Google plastination. So they have these people in huge glass cases, and on the cases it has a label saying real human specimen. This was weirding me out. I radioed Mike, hey, are these people real up in the human anatomy exhibit? It took him a few seconds to respond. Most of them are wax actually, only a few are real, he retorted. Stay where you are, I'll show you. About 5 minutes later, Mike walked up the stairs. He motioned for me to follow him, so I did. He walked around to the back of the exhibit and pointed a finger at one of the cases. This one is real, he said. How do you know? I replied, a little skeptical. He used to work here, Mike retorted in a matter-of-fact tone. My heart nearly stopped. What I said with a little shake in my voice. Yeah, he was one of the directors here. Said he wanted to be put on display to help others learn. I met him. He was a good man. My heart steadied itself. Hearing he was a good man made me feel better. It was a very selfless act for him to do this. It brought a smile to my face. What are you smiling about? Mike said, while making a serious tone of eye contact. He was a selfless guy, it seems. A nice one too, I kept eye contact. Mike was smiling too. You're right, he was. He then walked towards another exhibit and pointed. This is the only other one that I know of. Did you know him? I said jokingly. Nope. Don't even know his name, he said with a shrug. I looked up at the man's face. His staring eyes, unblinking, gazed into the distance. Mike took advantage of the silence and told me to go back to patrolling. I did as he asked. I finished my final patrol around 3 that morning. It took a little longer because I was interested in some of the other exhibits, but work didn't get off until 7, so I had 4 hours to kill. I walked to the lounge. There sat another night worker, one of the other 4 who work with me. His name was Isaac, a tall, lanky man in his upper 20s. I plopped down on the couch perpendicular to his and pulled out my phone. I had finished punching in my lock code when I heard him speak. I heard over the radio you were wondering about the human anatomy exhibit. I looked over at him. Yeah, I said. Want to know something? He replied coolly. Sure. That unnamed man up there, he pointed towards the ceiling. He blinks sometimes. I gave a hearty laugh. "Oh, spooky," I said while making ghost hand gestures. He laughed as well. "I thought you'd say that. Just remember that when you're making your rounds up there." "Yeah, I look out for some night at the museum shit going on up there," I replied with a smile. "You do that, Eric?" He buried his head in his newspaper. I did the same with my phone. 7 came quicker than usual that day. I clocked out and took the L train home. I made myself a bowl of cereal and fell asleep watching the morning news. My phone went off around 10:30 that evening. Time for work. I got up, did my usual thing, and got on the train. I arrived at work at 11:15, 15 minutes early. I saw Jack in his office, typing away on his computer. I went to my locker and got my clothes on. I was adjusting my belt when Mike walked in. "Evening, Mike." "Hey, Eric," he said while digging through his locker. "You want to go first?" I replied while looking back at him in the mirror. "Sure. You take the greenhouse and I'll do the main gallery. We'll switch around one." I nodded in agreement and walked to the vending machine. I punched the code of a Mountain Dew. I got it for free. The perks of working here. I opened the can and drank up. Mike walked out of the room. "Let's do this," I thought to myself and pushed open the door. Everything went smoothly. No damage and everything was where it should have been. Time to kill some time. I was reading up on Buzz Aldrin when my radio pinged. I looked at my watch, 1 a.m. I walked to the main gallery. I saw Mike and waved. He waved back and we walked past each other. I ascended the stairs to the main floor and began my sweep. Nothing out of the ordinary. I walked up to the top floor. I started with the anatomy exhibit. I started walking past the nameless man's glass case. I glanced up at him. I found his eyes staring right back. His fucking eyes were staring at me. I jumped and blinked. His eyes were back to their usual place. I let out a sigh of relief and let my rational brain take over. I must be seeing things. Yeah, seeing things. I'll lay off the Mountain Dew. I continued my sweep, a little weary of what was going on around me. I walked past the old director. This time I saw him move. His head moved diagonally downward and his eyes rested on me. He smiled. I became wide-eyed. My heart started pounding. My palms were getting sweaty. Still making eye contact with him, I reached for my radio. "Hey, Isaac." His response was almost immediate. "Heyo. What can I do for you?" He sounded happy. "Let's get the medical staff to tighten up the poles that are supporting our dear friends in the anatomy exhibit." The silence was deafening. The director was still looking at me. "I'll have them get on it," he said. His voice was serious and panic-filled. I backed out of the exhibit. As soon as I got to the stairs, I booked it. I wasn't about to stay another minute there. That night, I had someone else do my rounds. I sat in the lounge trying to process what I just saw. It could be the poles supporting him became loose, I thought. Then he wouldn't have fucking smiled at me. This was getting to be too much. I got myself a bag of chips and started pacing. I was mid-stride when Mike walked in. "Just wheeled one of the glass cases into the medical lab. I'll leave a note for them," he said dryly. "Thanks, man." "I owe you one," I said in a shaky tone. "No problem," he said, walking away. It felt like forever waiting for 7 to roll around, but eventually it did. I punched out and got my ass out of there. I got home and took a long shower. I got out of the shower and saw I missed a call on my phone. It was Jack. He left a message for me. "Hey, Eric, just got a call from the medical staff. They say all supporting poles are firmly planted in their base. I'll see you at work tonight." My heart dropped. I got some clothes on and opened my laptop. Time for some research. I searched for hours, gathering information about the museum. I found the old director had died of natural causes, at the age of 70, but found nothing on the nameless man. I was getting tired, and at some time that day, I passed out. My alarm woke me up again. I was contemplating calling in sick, but I knew I had to go. I went through my usual routine and arrived a little later than normal. 11:21, I saw Jack on his computer again. I walked up and knocked on his door. "Hey, Jack." "Jack. Yeah, have you ever seen anything move on its own here?" He looked up at me with a serious expression on his face. "Close the door," he said. He pointed to a chair and I sat down. "I take it you saw them move." Yeah, I stuttered. "Only a few have seen it. Consider yourself lucky." "What? Why?" How I just yelled out. "I have no idea, Eric. I've double-checked every logical thing that could have influenced it. I sat there speechless. He almost never smiles at other people. He must see some good in you. He pointed at the wall. A picture of a younger-looking Jack with an elderly gentleman who looked oddly familiar hung on the wall. Jack glanced at his wall clock. Your shift starts now. I walked out of the office and made sure to avoid that exhibit at all costs. I went home,